So, um, really, thank you for being here. And here's the deal. I made this little video art project, film, dance performance because I worked very hard with a lot of people who are on this chat, and a lot of you, to get Biden elected. And I thought that once Trump was gone from office and Biden was elected, that I was going to feel really better and I was going to feel happy and I was going to be joyous. And that just didn't happen for me. And I was still feeling the toxicity, which some people now call trauma, of the last 4 years, the hatred and the misogyny and the racism and the way that immigrants were treated and the lying, just everything. The way the pandemic was not handled correctly. And I was just really, I wanted to be happy, but I just wasn't. So I created this ritual, which you will watch, put together a bunch of things. And it was a way for me to kind of um, cross this sort of liminal space and to try to, it was a ritual to move out of the darkness into a state where I could just feel better about the world and try to embrace humanity in a way that I find really important. So this is, and it wasn't just for myself. That's also why I'm showing it to you, because I also wanted to create something for other people, because I figured if I was feeling this way, maybe a lot of other people. So the idea was also to share this. And since I like to do things in community, and if this weren't COVID, this would be at my house or would be in a gallery and we'd all be together and there'd be wine or food and it'd be a different kind of celebration. But at least it's a virtual celebration and at least we're all together. So it's really for everybody to heal past the toxicity, if that makes any sense.
But first, I'm going to introduce everyone. And Jill asked me to introduce myself as well. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Asti Hustvedt, and I'm a writer and independent scholar. My work tends to focus on the female body as the site of something inexplicable, something that male science investigates and attempts to control. I'm the author of Medical Muses, Hysteria in 19th Century Paris, and I'm currently working on a book about late 19th and early 20th century mediums. Hysterics and mediums had bodies that troubled social norms and baffled scientists, who argued that their bodies obeyed no known physiological laws. Their bodies were understood to be too porous, susceptible to possession by outside forces, both divine and demonic. In fact, the hysteria doctors pathologized mediums as well as female saints and witches as hysterics. Now, I'm going to be really upfront here. I know next to nothing about Tantra. However, from the very superficial reading I did preparing for tonight, and from my conversations with Jill, I've learned that Tantra is a philosophy of revolutionary thought that transgresses social and religious norms. And like hysterics, mediums, female saints, and witches, Tantric goddesses challenged patriarchal models of womanhood as passive and subservient. So in case I've gotten my Tantra information wrong, which is very likely given how little I know about it, Sally Kempton can correct me. Sally is nationally recognized as a Tantric philosophy scholar and a master meditation teacher. She was an early voice in the second wave feminist movement and worked as a successful journalist, writing on popular culture, the arts, and feminist issues for Esquire, the New York Times, New York Magazine, and the Village Voice. Spirituality during that period of her life was the last thing on her agenda. But then she had a spiritual awakening, and in 1972, she met Swami Muktananda and became his full-time student, editing many of his books and receiving training in the texts of Vedanta and non-dual Shaivism. In 1982, he initiated her into sannyasa, the Indian order of monks. For the next 20 years, she served as a teacher in the Siddha Yoga meditation community. In 2002, Sally was inspired to put aside her monastic identity to create a teaching path that could help students deal directly with the challenges of the 21st of 21st century life. And there have been some challenges. Sally is also the author of the books Meditation for the Love of It and Awakening Shakti, the transformative power of the transformative power of the goddesses of yoga. Now for Jill. I met Jill Goldman when we were students in Paris in the early 80s. At that time, Jill was already brilliant and intense and danced at every opportunity. She was also practicing a variety of ritualized behaviors that she used to protect herself, to ward off catastrophes, such as plane crashes. She went on to become a filmmaker, and recently she has become a visual artist. She's had 2 shows at Arcane Space in LA. The first, Fort Da, was an immersive multimedia installation and performance. And last year she created Memories of Places I've Never Been, a show that investigates the death of her father by suicide when she was 9 years old. Jill is also a social activist. She is co-founder of Go Campaign, a nonprofit that improves the lives of vulnerable children by partnering with grassroots leaders in 37 countries. She's worked on numerous political campaigns, including Barack Obama's, Pete Buttigieg's, and most recently, Joe Biden's. Ever since I've met Jill, I have been impressed by her ability to affect change. Now, I'm going to tell you a short anecdote that illustrates what I mean. Jill was in New York staying with me during the terrible aftermath of the earthquake in Haiti in 2010. While I fretted and empathized and sent in a donation to the Red Cross, Jill picked up the phone and somehow managed not only to secure donated medical supplies, but an airplane to deliver them with. And when it turned out that the main international airport was shut down, she found an alternative place for the plane to land. And she finalized these complicated arrangements while the 2 of us were getting pedicures. While I sat there stupidly flipping through a stupid magazine, Jill was on the phone making a real impact in people's lives. Most recently, Jill brought me into 2 projects that had one goal: to get Donald Trump out of the White House. Together with other female friends, we worked with artists to raise funds for organizations that work year-round to mobilize voters and for the Biden campaign. In other words, Jill is someone who understands her own power to transform the world, either through taking on social justice issues or by attempting self-transformation. So, when our goal of getting our national shame out of the White House was reached, but she continued to feel what I believe many of us continue to feel, a kind of lingering, vile, psychic dishonor that was inflicted by Trump, she decided to do something about it. So, Jill, the first question is for you. I know you felt stuck in a kind of murky liminal state, a disorienting and uncomfortable place located somewhere between the horror and outrage that we felt during those 4 terrible years and a full embrace of a more equitable today. You're not alone in this. In fact, some psychologists are talking about post-Trump traumatic syndrome. I'm pretty sure I have it. But as far as I know, you might be the only one who has devised a tantric ritual to move past it. My question for you is, did it work?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think my face is supposed to get bigger next to Asti.
You're fine.
Is my face next to yours, Asti?
Well, it's right above mine, but it's the same size on.
Oh, okay. I don't have that.
And it looks exactly the same size. So
okay. I don't have that view. Sorry.
Just keep up. Yeah.
Oh, I'm in gallery. Sorry. Just
No, just
okay. Whatever. I'm gonna keep going. I can't see myself. Yes, it did work, and just a little bit on that. About 2 years ago, I was making a transition in my life, and I needed to sort of perform a ritual to get past this particular personal thing I was going through. And I learned sort of how to do it with these sort of 3 steps. And I did it, and it helped me get through a difficult transition that I actually kind of went through rather smoothly. So I kind of realized these sort of rituals work. And during the last year, I started studying Tantra with Sally. We can go into that later. I really didn't know what Tantra was, but I was really realized that a lot of the teachers I'd been studying with for the last 32 years were in fact part of what they taught was Tantra. So I kind of combined the first sort of ritual I had done 2 years ago with some of the things I learned about invoking certain powers of certain sort of sacred feminine energies, really tapping into certain 3 specific energies in this piece. And you can see that there's a section in black, a section in red, and a section in white. And each of those are invoking particular energies, which are sort of associated with goddesses, but for me, they were very specific energies. So the black part was, you could tell the music was kind of drumming, and I was really that was the kind of Kali energy, trying to cut through and destroy. The moves were kind of harsh, trying to get through the negativity. Then the red, which is the goddess who I most associate with, which was Lakshmi, was just trying to balance and sort of an image of kind of purity, and that was the second part. And the third part was white, which was Saraswati, which was creation and more lyrical and getting to the place we wanted to get to. And it had 2 parts to it, kind of protection and surrender. And the way I know it worked was I went with my mom recently, actually last week, to Utah. We were staying in a hotel, and we were going on these hikes with other groups of people. And one of the other groups of people was from Texas, and one of these individuals didn't wear a mask. And before I'd done this ritual, I would have gotten really angry at this guy. And also the way he talked about COVID, he sort of didn't believe it would happen. And he sort of said he was going to take his chances with it. And I could tell that he had voted for Trump. Let's just be honest, that he was a Trump supporter. He was from Texas. He didn't believe in COVID. And I was so nice to him. Like, I didn't get angry, and I didn't say what I didn't even want to say that. I just sort of accepted him, and I walked with him, and I realized, oh my God, like, I never thought I'd be able to sort of accept this person and not be so full of real anger, like, what in the fuck did you do to this country? And I didn't. And it was a big shift in me that I could actually talk to this person who I would have never, I mean, you can ask anyone who I would have never been able to have this conversation. So I feel like for me, it did get rid of that level of anger, and just, I was not as pissed off with him as I would have been had I not done this. So for me, that shift, I feel like it kind of worked. So yes, it did work.
That's amazing.
Okay.
All right, so this is for Sally, and I know this is a bit of an unfair question because it's way too broad, but before we go any further, can you please briefly explain for those of us who don't really know what Tantra is, and perhaps also a bit what Tantra is not? I think, before tonight, when I thought about Tantra, I kind of thought about esoteric or hedonistic sexual practices, and that was about it. Am I muted or not? No. I think Sally, oh, there we go. Okay, and then a few other things, like for it's a multi-part question, and you can take up all of these or none of these, but basically what the Sanskrit word means. I saw a variety of explanations, the role of goddesses, and also why do those goddesses, some of them at least, seem to embody violent power, and what about the erasure between the sacred and the profane. So anyway, so Tantra.
Tantra, yes. Well, let's just start with the Sanskrit, because Sanskrit is, the Sanskrit words, especially Sanskrit spiritual words, have a lot of significance in understanding the concept. So Tantra is 2 syllables, tan, which means to expand or to stretch, and tra, which means to save, to liberate. So Tantra is wisdom, is the expansion of wisdom whose goal is the liberation of the human spirit. So, and that sounds like every other form of Indian philosophy. Tantra claims to be the advanced course. And I'm just going to give you some of the things that it encompasses, because it is a really big tent. So Tantra includes magic, incredible spiritual mystery, um, mind expanding philosophy, rituals up the kazoo. It's very much to do with rituals. Goddesses are a major aspect of Tantric tradition, and I'll say more about that in 2 seconds. It's about power. It's about the power centers in the body, the chakras, the life energy, the transformative energy called Kundalini, um, yantras or energy diagrams or mandalas. Uh, let's see, mudras, gestures, which we were actually seeing in the film, that express different pure forms of consciousness, uh, ecstatic experience, sorcerers, witches. It's a very, very big tent, and their styles of tantra. Tantra is also it's in both Hinduism and also in Tibetan Buddhism. There's a lot of, and in Taoism. So it is actually an understanding about the world, which is that the physical world is a tapestry of sacredness. And what that means in terms of our practice is that anything in the world can be a path to practice. So, and that of course includes a lot of shamanistic practices. There's a lot of overlap between tantra and shamanism. Some aspects of tantra are very focused on ritual, very focused on mantra, very focused on doing everything correctly. Some of them are more about understanding the godness, the divinity of the world, and the so specific questions. Tantra is mostly understood in the West to be about sex. When you tell people you're teaching tantra, everyone says, "Oh, are you teaching sacred sexuality?" And in fact, there is a sexual practice in tantra. Uh, there are also practices for using food as a path to divinity, using aesthetic experiences. It's a very aesthetically based tradition, which is part of why what Jill is doing is so tantric. But essentially, I would say Tantra is about transforming experience through ritual and the transformation of your understanding. And it very much focuses on the divine feminine, on goddess, and the female body as a locus of powerful spiritual energy, transformative energy. So I hope that helps as a general overview.
Um, all right. So I guess this could be for both of you. And Jill, it seems that your ritual seemed to be very much about a transformation in the world via your body, rather than a transcendence of it, which I think some practices that's the goal. So I'm wondering if you can speak a bit about how tantric practices are embodied.
Okay, so that brings me to my can you hear me? My newfound interest in Tantra. And I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. From the time I was very young, I had experiences. The first one, I think I was 5 years old. And I remember this very clearly. Before we moved to Beverly Hills, we were living up in the hills. And I woke up one morning and I went to my mom and I said, "Mom, I see the universe. It's all connecting." And just everything, I couldn't see the boundaries between things. Just everything dissolved. She promptly took me to the eye doctor, who said everything was fine. And I said, "No, you don't understand. Like, I see everything connected." That went away. That experience happened again in college in kind of a different way when I was not taking drugs at that time. And again, I saw everything connected. And I didn't have a framework for what that meant. I just knew that at certain times I could experience this complete oneness. And it's hard to explain unless you've had that experience. And once you've had it, you'll know what it is. Sally can go into what that experience is. And then I met my first meditation teacher, Guru Mai, and I went to an intensive and I had that experience. And it was the first time I knew what that was called. Like, I knew that it was sort of consciousness, and I knew this is what people did to get into this state. And I was very lucky that it happened at that time. And I can't tell you how grateful I am. And then for many years, I mean, it's only by grace. I can't explain to you how I can get into that state and what it does for me. It's often been associated with physical proximity to a guru, which is someone who holds that energy. And Sally can explain that. But there are some kind of beings who've gone through a certain amount of sadhana or a certain kind of spiritual practice, and they, to me, act like a fire. So by getting near them, you just get their heat. And for me, I could tap into that state. When I was studying with Guru Mai, now this is something I learned from Sally many years later, about 32 years later, that some of the texts that were key to Baba Muktananda and to Guru Mai, particularly the Svandakarika and some of the some other texts she can tell you about, that this these particular practices were tantric, and that I guess other people might have known that who were studying with Guru Mai. I had no idea that they came from these particular texts. And there are three main texts that, Sally, do you want to say what the specific three texts are, the main tantric texts?
Well, the key one is called the Shiva Sutras. They're aphorisms that were supposedly revealed by the divine in the form of Shiva. The Spandakarikas, which is about the energetic aspect of the world, and the Vijnana Bhairava, which means the wisdom of the infinite. Right. So these are like the core texts.
Core texts, and they're very difficult too. So if somebody on their own wanted to go study them, you just couldn't. You have to have a teacher. They're written, Sally, they're written very aphoristically, very they're basically impenetrable unless you have a teacher teaching you them. Would you not agree, Sally?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're basically reading the text and you're reading someone's interpretation and someone's interpretation, which is why you really need a teacher or a guru to help you through that. And then I realized that many years later, I had another meditation teacher who I still have. And some of the things that really, in between, I had been to a lot, after my original guru stopped offering programs, I had about 10 years where I just didn't have a teacher. And I met a lot of different teachers who just didn't resonate with me. And then I met another teacher who did, and I didn't realize that these practices in Isha were also very tantric. And I didn't know that was never really talked about. But some of the things that he did, and first of all, the way he made me feel that he could actually give Shaktipat or awaken this energy. But some of the particular practices, he does a lot of things kind of with alchemy, with Mercury, certain ways that the goddesses are worshipped in this particular temple. I didn't realize that those again were tantric things. So again, I'm thinking, God, how is it that I never knew that these two particular people who were really big in my life for 32 years were tantric? And Sally can explain that part of the reason that these, do you want to talk about when so I'll tell the bad version of this, but Vivekananda was a student of Ramakrishna, and when Vivekananda came to the West in the 1890s, 1893, to bring Hinduism to the West.
Yes.
Yeah, 1893. This is a bad version, so I will fix it. In 1893, and his teacher was a very big tantric. I mean, Ramakrishna. Nikki was on this call. We went to the temple. Like, he transformed into Kali. He would have never eaten if he didn't have to. He was living in this ecstatic state of goddesshood. But when Vivekananda came, they made a real attempt not to kind of mention Tantra or to bring that to the West. And it's my belief that, and also in India, that they try to, the patriarchy or certain types formalized religions, Hinduism tries to keep Tantra down a little bit. Could you, Sally?
Do you want to finish?
Talked about it in that way. So, yeah.
Yeah. Do you want, I mean, no, I'm not going to, I don't want to interrupt.
No, go ahead. Yeah, that's my understanding.
I'll add whatever feels like I.
Okay. So that's my understanding. So I was drawn to this because I'm drawn to something of understanding this experience of oneness with how I view it is that we're all connected in this one thing. I've seen that and I experience that, and I can't stand divisiveness towards another. And really this practice and these various practices really root you in that. And once you experience that, and it sounds like, I know it sounds crazy, but once you experience this sort of expansive consciousness, like it's just true. You just know it. Does that make sense? Sally, you can put it in smarter terms. I'm just like, that's my direct experience. So
well, that's the gist of it, actually. I mean, the gist of it is really simple, that only one thing exists. the divine in its various permutations, and everyone and everything is part of that. And once you see it, then it's very difficult to, to believe in a lot of the stuff that, that roils the world right now. So, but I would also say that the thing that you're doing in this piece, which is to say, affecting transformation through the bodies of the sacred feminine, through three forms of the bodies of the sacred feminine. This practice, this process that you are doing, which is a core tantric practice involving three forms of the creative energy, because in tantra, the feminine is considered the creative aspect of what let's just use the word God. It's the easiest, of the source of the Tao, and is often depicted in the form of goddesses. But what it really is the underlying energy that manifests everything. So when you want to transform reality, and this process that Jill was doing is very much a part of religious rituals and ceremonies and festivals in India. You start out by dispelling the darkness, dispelling the negative, dispelling the violence, dispelling everything in you that is standing in the way of your full spiritual realization. And that's associated with the goddess Kali, which is the first part of the film. Once you've dispelled the negativities, then what appears is let's call it the gift bestowing, beauty bestowing aspect of the divine feminine, which was the middle dance, which is associated with the goddess Lakshmi, who's the goddess of abundance and beauty and fertility, and the gorgeousness of the natural world. And once and the thing about that aspect of the divine feminine is that it's very oriented towards, materiality. It's very oriented towards clothes, gold, jewelry, houses, all of those things that we enjoy in the physical world. And there's a kind of refinement of that energy which goes on, which Jill was expressing in the dance. And once that energy has been fully refined, then the third goddess, Saraswati, who is not only pure creativity, as was seen in that beautiful dance, but also is direct spiritual experience, kind of upper chakra spiritual experience. So in the body, Kali is associated with the lower chakras, Lakshmi with the heart, and Saraswati, the third goddess, with the higher chakras. And so we bring our stuff, we bring our shit into, which is there in the body. We churn it with the Kali quality, and then it expands into its most positive expression with the Lakshmi quality, and then it refines itself and reveals the connection between the physical world and the transcendent world as personal experience. And that's a core tantric ritual. And the way you do it in tantra, that's, I'm not sure unique, but very much very significant, is that you do it by bringing these divine energies into the body. So as Asti was talking about, how in the 19th century, women who exhibited unusual behavior were seen as hysterics, and the great Spanish mystics were seen as hysterics. In India and in this tradition, there is an understanding that women tend to be, yes, more porous, more open to goddess energies. And there is very much a practice of bringing goddess energies into your body, which men as well as women do. So it's actually considered a genuine spiritual practice to install the feeling of the goddess in the body. And when you do that, you install her powers as well, because Tantra is very much about power and transforming it. So this kind of ritual where you invoke the goddess of intensity, you invoke the goddess of abundance, and you invoke the goddess of, let's call it spiritual wisdom, in a kind of successive fashion, as you rise up the chakras. And then you bring the energy back down into your body so that it's fully integrated. The higher energies and the earth energies are fully integrated. And this is a perfect tantric ritual in that sense.
So the first piece I did, which was to get over this thing 2 years ago, it was it was included in my last show, and it had the same colors, black, red, and white. I don't know if you guys remember it. And there was Proust in the background, and I was dancing, and that was sort of a Laura Lynn is on here. It was sort of a psychic ritual I was doing to get this energy away from me from something I had to leave 2 years ago. And what happened to me over the last year, because I was home with COVID and doing a lot of reading, was that in my mind, I kind of rightly or wrongly or intuitively kind of merged these tantric goddesses and these energies. And I have all these really complicated drawings, and I would always call Sally, like, are you sure this is drumming is okay? And I was always drawn to these colors, red, red, black, and white. And Wendy, who's on here, had this book of these tantra images, and I was drawing shapes, that were kind of coming to me. And then I would later like find, oh my God, these shapes are in these books, and these shapes are in this thing. And it kind of came to me. But I was sort of at once trying to learn it. And and that's the other thing you have to understand, that Tantra is a really complicated esoteric system. And there's all kinds of words that are really hard to understand. And they all sound alike. They're kind of in Sanskrit. They have charts up. I mean, Sally, they have so many charts and so many layers, and so difficult to really, and Sally makes it easy to understand. And Sally's charts basically simple to understand. But I wanted to make sure to kind of, while it kind of was coming intuitively, I also wanted to root it in something that was really real. And thank God it was. And Sally was a very big help in me thinking, like, okay, I don't really like that. Are you sure Lakshmi? And the Lakshmi thing, thank you to so many friends. I had to film Lakshmi 3 times because I just couldn't get it right. And that was, okay, well, I have to say the goddess who I feel the most close to, if I had to pick one, would be Lakshmi. I mean, wearing jewelry and stuff, but that was the hardest one for me to find the location, because I really had to situate her properly, and I was obsessed. And everybody who volunteered, their lovely houses and their green trees and me moving around flowers, and I'm like, oh, I don't know if Lakshmi belongs here. I mean, I really made a big point to try to get it right for these energies. So that was
Yes.
part of the process. And the music, I have to say, the last music is I just want to call attention to it. The music was also really important, and I don't know a lot about music, but Veronica, who was Kali, recommended this Alice Coltrane, and it ended up being so perfect because that whole last piece, which is the Saraswati, which is Roxanne dancing, that's all an improvisational piece. And Saraswati is so much about improvisation and creativity, and that was a piece that Alice Coltrane, an improvisational piece that she wrote when she was in an ashram, and so that kind of worked. And the music kept, I should mention this, I told this to Asti, I would have crazy things, like music would just sort of show up on my iPhone. And as Laura Lynn knows, like weird things, just synchronicities start happening. And I was looking for music in this one song. I really did not add it to my Spotify list. It just showed up. Like the universe was kind of conspiring to help me all along the way. So for that, I'm grateful too.
Yes.
So I have another question that might be sort of off base, but Jill and I, throughout this process, have been talking about witches quite a bit. And I don't think we've ever talked about witches before, but for some reason they keep cropping up in both of our lives in different ways. And Jill, however, was determined to try to get she was determined to sort of exercise the Trumpiness that continued to lurk in her soul. And as she was doing this, again, she kept seeing witches, like brooms and cauldrons and the whole shebang.
Fighters.
And so she made a concerted effort to keep them at bay and turn to Tantra instead. However, I think that there might be a connection here between, Sally's already mentioned it, between witchcraft and Tantra, between witches and perhaps Tantric goddesses. That might not be true. Or at least a common impulse to dismember patriarchy. So anyway, I'm wondering if either one of you wants to talk about that a little bit. Yeah,
Well-
I think I'm really growing to like witches.
Okay. You want to start with Sally and then
So, I mean, first of all, witches seem to be very, very in our consciousness this year. I've seen 2 TV specials
Oh, yeah.
in which witches are a big deal. One of which is Dark Materials. I don't know if you've seen that. It's terrific. It's on HBO. Anyway, it's full of witches, but they're good witches, but very glamorous good witches. And the other one is it's called A Discovery of Witches. It's about a woman who has witch powers and has to learn how to use them. And the interesting thing about the second one is that, as you know, in Western witchcraft, there's a lot of ritual. So, and the idea of witches in, at least as I'm aware of them, is that you can kind of bend reality if you have the proper, the proper protocol. And Tantra is like that also. It really, it very much recognizes that if you know how to move through the seams of reality, you can change things. And of course, your motivation and your character makes a big difference. So in India, there's a big tradition of black magic and sorcery, which is often associated with Tantra, because you can use these mantras, which are basically spells, and you can find these spells in books. You can learn how to do them. You can enliven them, and then you can use them to curse your enemies, and you can also use them to gain riches. So there's a whole tradition in India of tantrikas who are basically sorcerers. They're usually guys, so they're not necessarily women, and people are scared of them. You don't want to piss off a tantric sorcerer, obviously. So it's a very similar understanding about people who have the power to use magic. My understanding about witches in the West is that normally they were just eccentric healer women who were persecuted because of their healing powers. The tantric sorcerer is not innocent. The tantric sorcerer is a practitioner who uses materials to change reality. And there's another piece which maybe we will, if you don't mind my banging on a bit, especially in the Buddhist tradition. There's a very interesting book called Passionate Enlightenment by Miranda Shaw, who's a Buddhist academic, about these little covens they were co-ed, they were men and women who lived, yoginis and yogis, they were called. And they lived in remote regions, often in the Himalayas, often around temples. They did ritual practices, and were often transgressive. They often did sexual rituals in circle. In tantric circles called chakras. They were extremely under the radar. And in modern times, we have been reading some accounts by people who actually met one of those yoginis and, got to study with them. And, this particular book I'm talking about, she gave him transmission through a ritual sexual act, which is, which is often apparently employed in these circles for a guru to initiate a disciple. I have no firsthand experience of this. So I'm not saying this to proclaim innocence, but more to say all I know about it is what I read. So and when you read someone's account of something like this, you're never quite sure whether it's the absolute truth or whether they're making stuff up. So, but there's enough evidence of it to know that there are actually covens of a slightly different kind than the kind we talk about.
I can share a little bit if anybody is interested. I don't know if you can see this, but I was doing my research. No, is that working? Yeah. So when I was researching witchcraft, for me that means reading a lot of books, and then I downloaded a bunch of articles. So there were quite a few witches groups, modern day Wicca kind of witches who were involved in the anti-Trump movement. They were doing these certain, oh, John, how do I?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I have a bunch of information if anybody wants to read it. And in the 60s, there was a group of feminists. I actually read a dissertation about them. I'm just going to show this. It's called, there was a group called WITCH, which
yeah.
stands for Witchcraft and Radical Feminist Activism. And it was during the 60s. I have a thesis, a dissertation if anyone wants to read it. And they did more performance art things. Like they were really not really witches. They would like dress up in black hats and sort of, they were 60s activists. And the thing for me, and they were performative witches, like they really weren't trying, whereas the ones now who were meeting and they were in these chat rooms and stuff were really trying to do these spells. And for me, I definitely think this is all really possible. But again, I was thinking there was no way were on here who knew me as a child when I had dabbled in witchcraft and things started happening. Like I think it's really, and unless I had a really good teacher or a really good guide who was going to guide me in this, I felt like it was just too dangerous for me to even step into that area because I didn't have a guide and I didn't have any, you can't just sort of, look for a coven to be part of it. You have to be accepted in it. You have to learn. And also I read some of these modern Wicca books and I was not drawn to the practices that they did. Like a lot of things were just not my cup of tea, but I also feel the same way with when you get into this sort of occultist kind of well, in meditation. So if you meditate a lot, you can get these powers that are called siddhis, and Sally can explain them. They're these certain powers that you can get, which a lot of, well, you can have them, and they scare me. So anytime I see when I've had those experiences of being with people who have these powers, which are like mind reading, and they go through space and time, and it's really real and it's really scary. So for me, I was like, I don't want to go near all this because I'm like a sponge. So that was my feeling of not wanting to embrace that. But I definitely think it's real, and I think you can practice that, and you can hone your skills, and you can do that. But for me, I wasn't willing to do that without a really good teacher and a guide.
Mhm.
So that's my experience.
Yeah.
But I do think there is something about, I also want to add this, that there's certain something empowering for women. I mean, at least in India, we're I can talk about that experience where some women aren't really as respected as they would be in other cultures, but women did always have the power in these sort of goddess, the way the goddess is worshipped in India. So it's sort of a dichotomy, and I think that's really interesting because you see so many people who worship the goddess, and then Sally was talking about this campaign that happened. If you guys remember that, I can't remember when it was. I think it was after some horrible atrocity in India where they had this picture of this goddess. And what did it say? It said like,
Well, it was a
treat
picture
your wife like a goddess or something.
of a black eye. So
Oh, yeah.
wounded goddesses. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was,
So, but yeah. Do we want to take some questions from the chat room? Because I think we only have 3 minutes left.
yes. Look,
There's only one question.
Oh, is there one question?
Do you want to,
I don't see them.
I
John
am
was wondering
looking to
where
see.
Lockheed was filmed.
Okay,
Are
let's
there-
see. Okay, here's a question.
Uh-huh.
The Schufers, so I'm not sure if it's
My sister. Okay.
Gina, Walter. Does the political part of you that is angry and wants to, does the political part of you that is angry and wants to remain vigilant and not complacent struggle with the spiritual part of you that is forgiving and accepting?
No, because for me, it's all about action for me. So that's how I like to see politics too. It's about acting. And so I felt like when I could do something about Biden, it was about action. And I feel like kind of art is about action. And I feel like now I'm going to be very active in certain things that I'm not happy with Biden. And so once I get paralyzed out of the fear, I feel like I can be more active in pushing for an agenda. Like I'm not 100% all the way there. I think Lindsay's on this with some of Biden's things he's doing right now with immigration, and Lindsay is on here. And if you follow her Instagram at MDAP, you can talk about some of the things that she's not happy with. I think it's, anyway, some of the immigration things, and the way that certain Haitian refugees are being sent back and they're not being processed, a certain kind of racism in the immigration policy, even though it's Biden. We're happy with Biden. I do think it's our job to push him to the left and to be really active. But for me, once I'm like in this like fear and feeling traumatized, I can't do any action. So I haven't really wanted to do anything since Biden was elected. I sort of felt like, okay, I've kind of done my thing. And now that I'm kind of past that, I feel re-energized, and whatever my next thing will be that I get. Right now, I'm really upset about this particular thing, which I can't explain. If you want to unmute Lindsay, she can explain it, but there's something that we all need to work on right now. Is Lindsay here? And it's really been bugging me, and it's been on my back burner. And I feel like getting past this helps me to be more active. And the whole part isn't to be sort of complacent, like, oh, whatever happens, like it's karma and let Biden do what he wants. I don't feel like that at all for me. And so much of this practice is about action. Can't unmute.
Well, Lindsay, I think if you have a question, first of all, for anyone who's interested in more information about just this, you can find in the chat under Lindsay has given her the information for the Law Center, the in-depth Law Center, and if you have a question, if you have anything you want to add, Lindsay, you can type it into the chat. I think that's how
my sister wants to add something.
Well, I just.
Of course.
Oh, Gina, do you want to?
I just told her to clarify in the chat.
Okay. Well, Gina can speak if she wants. I don't know how to.
Well, then I have to find her.
Okay. Well, I guess no one else can speak.
No, I can, if you want.
I think she might have to unmute herself. Isn't that how that works? Or
I think I have to. She can try to unmute herself, but otherwise I have to find her.
Okay, well, anyway, Lindsay will I don't know what that is, and my sister can type in, but please look at that because it's an important thing. So I do feel ready to take more action, and I think that if you're really traumatized, and as people know about trauma, you don't really feel like doing anything. So I hope that answered your question, Gina.
No.
Sally, would you agree? Being
I
political
totally
activist?
agree. And I think that I really do believe that spiritual practice is really important for activists, and activism is really important for spiritual practitioners because it's all about integration. We get our juju from the higher realms and from within the body, and then part of our dharma is to make the world better. So to make the world more hospitable to as a divine tapestry. So they go together for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's really hard when you feel that kind of anger. Part of it fuels activism, but also we need to be able to figure out what our next moves are and strategize and to really put our action in the right place.
And I think that one of the points that you're making here, Jill, is that actually we believe that anger is what drives us to action. In fact, anger often paralyzes us or keeps us from doing effective action. So the fact that you start by processing your anger is really important, I think.
Gina was there. Maybe she wants to talk, but I don't know how to
Yeah, no, she's unmuted.
You're unmuted, Gina?
Yeah.
Oh, can I speak now?
Yeah.
Gina.
Oh, hi
Hi,
guys.
sister.
Oh, I just spent a whole long time typing it in.
Okay.
But no, my question actually, and it was a good answer, thank you, was going back to your original observation of yourself and how you transform through this ritual and were able to be accepting and kind towards that man on your walk who you viewed as an anti-masker and possibly a Trump supporter. Politically, do you not still hold the belief that it's important not to welcome the people back to the table and to the conversation who found themselves on the wrong side of history as a way of normalizing really bad behavior?
I'm not in.
You spiritually feel like it's important to resolve your anger in order to transform it into action, because I
don't feel like those people want to participate in the government. I think they've proven that they want to overthrow the U.S. government. So I don't feel like I need to. I'm for, if you want my political beliefs, I'm for the filibuster. I'm for just pushing as much stuff as we can through right now. I don't care about their beliefs.
No, but that's not my question. I'm just saying that is there a risk that if you can transform yourself into a place where you can be kind, or you can be patient, or you can be forgiving, or you can be accepting, or you can be not troubled by the same people who created all of this angst and all of this trauma over the last 4 years, then are you not at risk in the grander scheme of participating in a social movement that doesn't ostracize people in a way that they need to be in order to prevent this from happening again? If we normalize that, then aren't we at risk of it happening? And no, I don't know, but I'm just saying, how do you then square that with the desire in yourself to not carry that, to rise, above it or get through it, particularly if it's what helps you move into action? Do you know what I'm saying? I could just see where those two things could be.
I don't know. Does Sally or Asti, do you guys have an opinion about that?
Well, I think that I had the same gut reaction to your little anecdote hiking as Gina had, but I also then heard what I also think that there is something about the nature of that in between kind of liminal, neither here nor there state that can be kind of paralyzing. Yeah. And as we all know, we all need Jill to be able to act. And the fact that maybe at that particular moment, she wasn't overcome by such intense hatred that it, I mean, the Trump supporting guy probably would have just welcomed that hatred. And in the meantime, it would have been eating her up inside, right? So maybe, you have to maintain that kind of a level of outrage at the behavior, but when it's turned inward and you're just unable to do anything, maybe then it's time to have some sort of a ritual so you can go back out and fight the fight. I don't know.
Yeah. Allie, do you want to give any closing notes on this before we have to go? And I want to thank everybody.
Well, yeah, I agree with everybody. That the thing is that the more we can process our rage, greed, paralysis, etc., the more effective we can be, and the more we can recognize that everybody is a human being, no matter what an asshole they are, or no matter how much you disagree with them politically. That only when you process your emotions can you speak soul to soul with others. And I think it's not just a question of being kind. It's a question of really recognizing that divine energy is working through everybody, and that ultimately this is this world is is a tapestry, a drama of it expresses what's going on inside people. And so the more you can do your activism from a place of love, to paraphrase Martin Luther King, the more you disarm those people whom you think of as enemies. And it's just a fact, that hatred breeds hatred, love breeds love. But love is not weak. Love is very strong. It's the energy behind the world. So if the more we can get rid of everything that doesn't let us love, the more our actions, including actions that may seem violent, can be motivated by love. And that actually is the great tantric insight. That love is everything. This universe is sometimes often violent. Yeah. And their two things are not in contradiction.
I should say that Sally is teaching the way Sally teaches, I'll just say this, is she's very text-based. So for people who've studied literature, Sam would call it close reading, but she really studies particular texts. So the last year we did 3 I know a bunch of people that were on this class. We really spent the year really doing the Yoga Sutras by Patanjali. And the next class is going to be on the Bhagavad Gita and the
Bhakti Sutras.
Bhakti
It's about
Sutras.
love.
Yeah,
It's
that starts the end of May.
love and action. Yeah.
And so, yeah, so it's very text-based.